All right, welcome to today's session on decision flow. So we're not going to have too much content for today's session. The goal is to provide you some tools, give you some examples to get you started on this lab exercise. And the lab exercise is focused on building some server-side validation code for an ASP.NET website registration form. So a user registration form that has an email field, a password field, and a confirmed password field. So imagine we have a user story. As a user, I want to register so I can do something, get to a landing page, right? So when we type in, when we click on the submit button for this page, we expect to see an error if none of these fields have been filled out by the user, right? So we need to build that server-side validation and show an error message. We also need to check if the password and confirm password fields um, have a mask for the user entered character, so a user can't see the password as they type it in. That's a typical security feature. We need to be able to check if the email address is a marquette.edu email or mu.edu email address. We need to make sure that the password that the user entered has at least 6 characters and that the password field matches the confirmed password value, right? When all the checks are meet the criteria that we identified up top, we're going to redirect the user to a landing page where there might be some information, some verbiage like welcome. And then once you're done, you can zip up your project, upload to D2L. What I really want to walk you through is, simple building of the form. We're going to use some tables in ASP.NET. I'll try to get you through masking the password fields, implementing the required field validation, and get you started through half of this part, and then I think you could do the rest on your own and finish up the lab, right? So let's get going. Before we get there, on the previous slides, there was some useful information about um, how to test if a string is null or empty. That's going to come in handy when we're trying to test if the text box that a user typed in the email or was supposed to type in the email address is empty or not. So that's how we're going to check if a user actually typed in something. If they did not type in anything, then we're potentially going to show an error message, right? So if you need a reference, you can go back to this slide and take a look at it. So this is how we could test for empty or null values, right? Either by checking the string against string.empty. String.empty is the same as quote, quote, no space between them, meaning empty string. Or you could also use string that is null or empty, a function or method for doing that. Um, in addition, when we need to test if the length of the password, the number of characters the user typed in, think of Twitter, maybe we can only type in 50 characters or 146 characters or whatever it is these days. How do we know how many characters a user has typed in, right? We in C# we can use the .length property of a string. So we can have a string example, some text, hello, and we create an integer variable to hold the length of this, right? Or we could just grab this value. We could find the length of the string by using the .length property of a string. Then we can compare it against, oh, is this greater than 6? If it's greater than 6, do A, otherwise do B, right? So let's get started. First thing we want to do is fire up Visual Studio. We're going to go to File, New Project. Hopefully you're very comfortable with this by now. I'm looking for ASP.NET Web Application. I'm going to name this Lab 10 and hit OK. We're going to keep this empty, Web Forms, and hit OK to create our project template. And Visual Studio is going to take a while to build out that project. Looks like we're all good to go. Solution Explorer. I have nothing, and what I'm going to do now is build 2 pages. to web forms, if you will. So right click, add web form. I'm going to create a web form called register, then another one called welcome. So the welcome page. All right, I'm going to switch to design view, and for now I am going to, on the register page, I'm just going to type in the keyword register, right, just for giggles. And then on the welcome page, I'm going to type in the keyword welcome, because I want to be able to differentiate the two pages. I am then going to add a button control somewhere on the screen, on the registration screen, and I will go ahead and set the property of this, the ID to BTN register. All right. I want the .text property of the button to be register now. You really want to push the user to register. So if you click on this button, my goal in phase 1 of this assignment is just to get this page to redirect to that page, right? So we're going to learn a new concept of how to write codes to take a user from one page to another. So I want to create the event handler. I double click on this. I get an event handler. And I can type in some code. So we're going to use response.redirect. This is a small piece of code that you want to take some notes on. This is how we redirect a user from one page to another. Code sample for redirecting from to another page. So in C#, in ASP.NET, if we need to take a user from one page to another, from the register page to the welcome page, we need to type in, this takes a string. If you hover over this, it tells you the input is string, some URL. So the URL here is just going to be what's the name of the page we want to go to. It's welcome.aspx, right? The path. If we had multiple folders, it would make it more complicated. Since this is in the same folder, we're just going to go response.redirect, take the user to the welcome.aspx page. Of course, you need to know how to spell the correct name of the file or path to the welcome page. Notice this is not case sensitive. This is lowercase w. The actual name of the page was uppercase W, but it's not going to make a difference, right? So don't get confused by that. Let's save that, and I'm going to try to test this in Chrome, my favorite web browser. So let's go ahead and run that. All right. So click register now. It takes me to the welcome page. Welcome.aspx. I can hit back. Takes me back to the register.aspx page. Mission accomplished. Close out of this, stop the program, and now we can write some code. So let's go build out the registration page. So we know that we need to have an email address, password, confirm password fields. I'm going to choose to use an HTML table to organize this, just to build something quick and dirty, right? So there we go. Now that I have this, let me pin the toolbox. The first field is going to be email address. Enter your email address. Maybe we could put asterisks here somewhere. Password. Confirm password. In reality, your registration form might have a lot more options. Just showing you an example here. So let's maybe see if we could style this a little bit better. A bit small. Change the color a little bit. Just cosmetics. Something like that. All right, so we're good to go. Next thing I'm going to do here is add some text boxes. So text box under standard. I need a text box for email address, another one for password, another one for confirm password. Right? And what I'm going to do here is set some properties. So the first box is going to be txt email, and that's good enough for what I need. And I'm going to set the other one, txt password. And this guy is going to be txt confirm password. Txt confirm password. Excellent. All right. What I want to do here is anytime I have an error message, I want to show the error message right next to the box in a label, in a text box. So I'm dragging and dropping 3 label controls. Actually just going to change the color of these to red. So I want all my errors to be in red, right? This is just cosmetic. Don't worry too much about that. I'm going to call this LBL email error. Okay, and then I'm going to remove the text property. I'm going to make that blank. So by default, it doesn't show any error messages. But when a user types in something that is wrong, then we will show an error message. So LBL password, if I can spell correctly, password error. And then here we go. Get rid of this. Do the same thing for this guy. LBL confirm password. Yes. All right, now we get rid of this guy, and we are in business. You might make this red, this asterisk red, if you're all about cosmetics. But this looks good enough for what I need to happen. So let's give this a shot. Let's test it out. I don't expect to see any errors by default when I run this. So hopefully that is happening as planned. This looks good. I click register. It still takes me to the welcome page. That's functionality that I built. Right? So we want to build this progressively. Now let's go ahead and start writing some code. But before we do that, I'm going to try to work on the first, actually the second field. So we want the password and confirm password fields to be masked, right? So if I go back in here to test this, if I start typing in email address, you can actually see the email, you can see the password, so on and so forth, right? This is not typical behavior that you'd expect on a registration form. You don't want to be able to see the password. You want some type of asterisks or dots masking the password to prevent shoulder surfers from stealing passwords. Okay, so what we need to do is select the password field, and then we're looking for the text mode property. We're going to change this to a password text mode, and that's all we got to do to build out the masking capability. Pretty easy. So I'm doing the same thing for the confirm password field. And for the email address, I'm just for giggles going to change the text mode to email. Web browsers tend to understand text mode, and sometimes they treat them really nicely. So we'll see if we can take advantage of that. So I try to click that. That goes through. I try to type something here, and I click register. The web browser, because I set this to text mode email, Chrome is telling me what I typed in. Please include an @ in the email address, blah, 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 is missing that, right? So Chrome is doing the validation. I have not written any code for that. So I get some beautiful capabilities there. If I start typing in password, you notice in confirm password, this is all masked. That's beautiful. I didn't have to write any code for that. Setting the properties took care of that. Now let's go ahead and write some code. All right, so I'm going to write some code to test if email is blank, then do something. Otherwise, take them to the page, the welcome page. So to do that, I want response.redirect to be the last line of code that runs, because that's where I would take the user when everything happens as planned. Typically, if I had a database, I would have a step here where I insert data in the user table. But we're not going to do that yet. So let's mark that as to do. In a future step, in your final project, you're going to have to do that when we learn how to talk to databases. For now, we're going to write some validation code here. So input validation happens in this step, step 1. Okay, so what we're going to do now is test if a user typed in a valid email address. So we can use something like if, and let me show you a shortcut. So if I type in if tab on the keyboard, hit the tab twice after you type in if, it kind of gives you the structure of an if statement. So an if statement has a conditional condition, and then we have some code that we would execute if this works correctly, right? So otherwise you could just type it in. I'm just showing you some shortcuts. So in this case, I'm going to type in txt email. When txt email .text, the .text property, right, when that is equal to string.empty, or you could do string that is null or empty, or a different way of testing it, right? So when this is empty, I want to show the user a specific error message, and that error message is going to go in the label email error .text, and it would say please enter a valid email address, right? Something like that. All right. So I'm going to repeat this for the password, right? And for this one, I'm going to have txt password, but show that in a different error field, label control this, and it'll say please enter a valid password. Or password is a required field, or email address is a required field, something like that, right? So you do your own, type in an appropriate error message. So let's go give this a shot. So we run this, and you practically want to do this, test this as frequently as possible. You don't want to write 50 lines of code only to figure out you have all kinds of errors all over the place. So I click on that. There's nothing happening. I'm getting some validation. G.com. It's going to the next page, but that's because I believe I have an error in my logic here. Basically, what I'm saying is if this is equal to nothing, show this error message. If this is equal to nothing, show this error message. Then I'm still going ahead and redirecting to the next page. Well, that is bad, right? So I need to somehow stop the screen, pause the screen, so it doesn't redirect. Now I can use an else statement and say, if this is blah, 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 otherwise redirect, right? But I'm choosing to make this my last statement because I want to do all this stuff, then potentially insert into the database. So I can use an approach where I type in the keyword return to exit the rest of this code. So as soon as this condition is met, do not run the rest of the code, right? So we would type in the keyword return, and that would stop the rest of the code from running. That means I don't ever get to response.redirect unless this condition actually passes. So let's give that a shot now. So try that. Register now. I get please enter a valid email address. So I type in something. I click that. I get please enter a valid password. I type in some password. But notice this enter email address didn't go away, even though I had please enter a valid password come up. And then I entered something. This went through. because this text mode is set correctly, notice Chrome is now assuming that I want to save my username and password. I'm going to select never at this point, but I'm going to go back in here and figure out a way to remove the error message. So if this is not, if there's no error, I want this to be string.empty. Right? So I don't want to show that error screen, right? Anytime I find out that this, so if the password is empty, I'm going to show the message and return and stop running the rest of the code. Otherwise, I will make sure that the label that shows the password error is blank at all times. Let's give that a shot, another shot. All right, here we go, blank. Please enter a valid email. I enter in 1. Now I get that error message going away, and I can enter in a valid password, click register, then it goes through, right? All right, so a smart thing to do if you're looking to save some time might be to copy paste, but if you're copy pasting, you need to be very careful. So I'm copy pasting, I want to change this to confirm password. Right now I'm going to test if confirm password is a thing, and then maybe I can also say please enter a valid confirm password field. So you can do that, but in this case I would be testing in the confirm password error field, LBL. Maybe I have this wrong, LBL confirm password. Oh, I guess I only had LBL confirm password. Well, that works too. So LBL confirm password is going to say please enter a valid blah blah blah. Technically, I can combine this condition with that condition if I wanted to, and use, if text password is empty or text confirm password is empty, show an error message that says please enter valid. But I'm breaking this out and showing you some examples, so this is fine. All right. I promised to get you through this other step, so let's get through that. So we've completed making sure everything is required. I'm going to write some code to test for does the txt email contain the marquette.edu email address. So let's do that. I want to move that to the top. The sequence of the code is very important. So this is input validation for email. I might have input validation for, this is input validation for password, right? Put some comments in your code to make it easier for you to follow what you were doing previously. So now I'm going to go back here. Test if email contains mu.edu and or marquette.edu. Excuse me. All right. So to do that, there is a property of a string called .contains. So I can do something like txt email.text.contains. So I could test if it contains a string like at mu.edu. Right, so if this contains mu.edu, I don't want to show an error message. I want to show an error message if it does not contain that. So I'm putting the exclamation sign in front of all this. So I'm saying if this does not contain at mu.edu, then show an error message and clear the error message if that's not the case. So I'm going to say please enter a Marquette email address. Now, when you come in to build your logic, let me give you a hint. You need to extend this. Potentially, in natural language, we would say contains mu.edu or marquette.edu. When you're looking at this reverse approach in C# code, try to think of this as and. Here's a clue. It might be and. And is two ampersand signs, whereas or is the two pipe signs, and then you would have your other condition, right? You might need this, and then whatever the other expression is. So keep that in mind when you're trying to work on your lab. Anyway, so let's go ahead and run this. And if it works, my work is done, and you get to complete the rest of the assignment. All right, so we've got blank screen, click register. Please enter a valid email address. I select that. Click register. Now I get please enter a Marquette email address. Okay, so we're gonna do jj@nu.edu. Click register. That error goes away. Now I need to enter a valid password. I'm going to type in T. Click register. Notice the T went away. That's just the browser knowing that it's a password. Generally, you'd have to retype it in if you don't type in the correct value, right? So I type in T again, click register, it redirects to the correct page, right? So this is what we're looking for. Now try to see if you can complete the rest of this. Test to see if the characters, it's got 6 characters, make sure password and confirm password equal, and that's a good project for you. Complete the lab, upload to D2L, make sure your zip file contains all the project files in your folder. Please make sure it doesn't contain just a solution file. Till next week, talk to you later. Bye.